Okay, welcome to the Nutrition Seminar, December 3rd, 2024. Here we go. So, disclaimer, I'm not a doctor. I'm not your doctor. Take it with a grain of salt. Taking a deep dive with evidence-based nutrition. What we're going to get back to a lot of is mindset. Every time we look at something, a topic, we're going to go back to mindset. Are we taking the evidence-based mindset, or are we taking the emotional mindset? Nutritional science is the science that studies the physiological process of nutrition, interpreting the nutrients and other substances in food in relation to maintenance, growth, reproduction, and health. See, notice how it doesn't say it's the study of finding out chemicals that are bad for you that you should avoid. That became a new thing. But what is the healthy body fat percentage for my age? A lot of people ask me that. Here's a good chart. You've got men, women. There you go. So I say typically, around the athlete or fitness area is going to be good. Fitness is definitely. There's no reason why any person under the age of 40 shouldn't be able to get the fitness range at some point in their life and maintain it for a while. So 80% of diets fail, and out of those 80%, half of them gain back more than they started with. So it's actually more important what you do after the diet. So we're going to talk about calories in, calories out. Terms that I'll be using: caloric surplus, where you consume more than you burn off, where you gain weight and you gain fat. Caloric deficit, where you burn off more than you consume, fat loss. So I think a lot of times there's a disconnect with people when they think of, well, sure, it's good for fat gain or fat loss, but how does calories in, calories out affect my health? Well, your measurable health markers improve as you just simply lose the weight and just become a healthier version of yourself, right? So the difference between fat burning and fat loss: everyone in this building is burning fat, every single person, at rest even. However, very few people may actually be achieving fat loss. Fat loss is achieved when the net difference between what is stored is less than versus how much is being burned or oxidized. So it's good that you're working out, it's good that you're showing up to the gym, but are you burning off more than you're taking in if your goal is fat loss? Your goal is to improve your body composition, improve your health. Because honestly, if you're lifting weights but you're gaining weight, are you really improving your health? Not really. You could be getting stronger but still increasing your cholesterol, So I would say the average person, once they get fit, should spend maybe 3 to 4 months in a deficit, and the rest of the year could be like a maintenance phase. Right? Achieving fat loss means you're doing more work with less fuel, which will always be hard. I'm so sick and tired of people saying, oh, this easy, fast way to do this. It's not going to be fast. It's not going to be easy. It will always be hard. Less fuel over time means less energy, means you're going to be feeling pretty drained if you're doing it properly. Your body will become more efficient with less calories, which is actually a bad thing. It means your metabolism will shrink, get lower, as you require less calories to maintain the same rate of fat loss. So keeping that in mind, a diet should ideally last 10 to 16 weeks at most. Treat it like a sprint. Get in, get out. And I've heard that from just about every reliable source has said the same thing on that. That's what I do myself as well. More muscle simply means less dieting. Imagine dieting a month or two instead of a year. Adding muscle is the only way to significantly increase your resting metabolism over time. Significantly, keyword. Muscle equals longevity and ability for more nutrient intake for healthier body, which we all want. Is there any one food in a deficit that will make us gain fat? Inflammatory foods, gluten, pasta, sugar, carbs? Nope. But the existential question, why? Well, the first law of thermodynamics says matter cannot be created nor destroyed within the universe. You cannot create fat tissue from nothing. You cannot create fat from 0 calories. It doesn't work that way. And in this house, we obey the laws of thermodynamics. So Common objection. Well, a calorie is not a calorie. You can't tell me that eating McDonald's is the same calories as eating clean eating. Well, that's like saying a mile per hour is not a mile per hour. Whether it's 6 miles per hour or 60 miles per hour, it's just a standard unit of measurement, right? There's no scientific definition of clean eating. Your body only recognizes macros and micros, macronutrients and micronutrients. Here's the big kicker. Macros are the big picture. Macro means big. They make up a majority of the impact on your health. Micros, not as much. Just because you're deficient in vitamin C for 6 hours doesn't mean you're going to become obese. However, if you're over-consuming fats and carbs for 6 months, that's going to have a way worse effect, right? So, furthermore, the content of calorie does not determine about the amount of fat being stored. Yeah. So however, hyperpalatable foods are easier to increase how many calories you're eating and should be eaten in moderation. So my rule when I coach people is an 80-20 rule. Now, very rarely should you eat strictly, unless you're doing a bodybuilding show. But even then, the less strict you are on eating, the more likely you are to sustain fat loss long term. The thing that you are restricting is the very thing that you will most likely binge eat on later. So, and binge eating has no bearing on who you are as a person or how much of an athlete you are or whatever, because even the best in the world could, if they deprive themselves long enough, they would give into that. Eating in a caloric surplus is what it makes us gain body fat. No food is inherently toxic to your health in moderation. In toxicology, the dosage always makes the poison. Okay? To be clear, there's only 2 viable diet models. Any decent diet will fall into these 2 diet models. Number 1, low-fat, high-carb diet model, or high-fat, low-carb. You can do one or the other. Notice I didn't say low-protein anything, because that's not a viable diet. You have to have high protein no matter what, because if you're going to restrict calories, you have to keep your protein high in order to sustain muscle mass. Now, the reason why low-fat works is because you're getting higher carbs, which means higher fiber. And fiber keeps you satiated when you're dieting. Not to mention, you're going to end up with more volume of food. If you lived off of oil, that's not much food volume. But if you lived off of any kind of carb, just even think of bread or waffles or like things that expand when you cook them to have more fiber, it's gonna be easier to stomach. It's gonna be more filling. But high-fat, low-carb model can also work. Now, a lot of people think immediately keto, but keto is not even a viable diet for me because ketogenic dieting was developed like in the 1950s to help combat neurological stuff like epilepsy. But because your brain is electrical, if you eat too much of one thing, of course, I'm never going to advocate for a high sugar diet like in a surplus, because that can cause sugar storage on the brain. Can be bad for you. Everything in moderation. But the high fat model doesn't seem to get as good of a result as the high carb model as far as sustainability. People just kind of fizzle out because, number 1, you lose muscle faster. Number 2, you might get hungry faster. Number 3, it might be actually harder to hit your macros. Why? Because fats are so calorically dense, it's very easy to mismeasure, and you could go over your calories and gain weight a lot quicker when you're trying to lose weight. Just a tricky diet. So the only people that really should do high fat, low carb are diabetics. That's it. That's the only time where it's warranted. Everybody else, athletes, anybody who wants to improve their health, they should eventually get to a higher carb model. All right. And I'm just kind of going back to what I just said, but high carb group consistently outperforms and can adhere to the diet longer, making it more permanent. I will say this, however, both diets will get you to lose weight if you do it properly. Just the adherence thing. At the end of the day, the diet you can stick to or adhere to is typically the best and typically the healthiest diet for you. And whether it's low carb, high carb, intermittent fasting, Whatever form of caloric restriction you find the best is the one that should be done for you. So what's the definition of good nutrition? All right, good nutrition is the ability to control your energy balance or the ability to control your weight. So that doesn't mean, well, I lost 10 pounds, I must be doing good. No, that means I lost 1 pound this week and I'm going to do it again next week. Losing 10 pounds in any amount of time is kind of a blind. It's like driving down the road. It's like, I made it 10 miles. Yeah, but it took you 5 days, Meaning if you plan to lose 1 pound and you do that while retaining muscle mass, that by definition is good nutrition, regardless of your emotions surrounding your food choices that week. Clean, dirty eating, useless, potentially dangerous mindset. So yeah, the dangerous mindset here is I'm only going to eat clean because I can't have anything processed because it's going to make me fat or it's not healthy for me. When in actuality, if a food has one ingredient versus a food having 20 ingredients, does simply the number of ingredients make it more unhealthy? No, it makes it more hyperpalatable, which makes it more easily to consume, which is the more likely to overeat and be in a surplus. The average American eats 3,500 calories a day. I actually heard a statistic for Thanksgiving. It's 3,000 to 4,500 calories in one meal for Thanksgiving. Yeah. So the main thing is to keep the main thing, and that is calories. All right. It's very simple. I don't know why people try to complicate it. It is super simple. Energy balance, just talking about like when you're controlling it, this is what an energy balance really is. Calories in versus calories out. The negative energy balance would cause you to, in the first scenario, I'll just go ahead and ask you, Lauren. First one at the top, would that make you lose weight or gain weight? Lose weight. Why? Because your output exceeds your input, right? And the bottom one, calories out, calories in, we're going to gain weight, right? Because our input exceeds our output, right? And people do this unknowingly. It's not like anybody's striving to do this 9 months out of the year. But the last 6 weeks of the year, people gain weight because they're just so blind to what they're eating. They're just consuming all this. It's not even really processed like stuff in this, like with a barcode. It's stuff that it's home cooked stuff with butter and oil in it. They throw out every smart cooking thing, like avoiding the butter. Anyway, which is easier to control, the input or the output? In other words, is it easier to restrict the food or to do more exercise to burn off? What do you think?
For me, personally.
It's not. You can't out-train a bad diet.
Yeah.
So this is why. The average American adult eats 3,500 calories a day and is sedentary. Okay? As a result, 69% of Americans are obese. We think that comorbidities and obesity are actually an underlying result of being under-muscled than just being overweight. So if someone developed their muscles, actually built the amount of muscle, let's say by age 30, which is typically when you tap out, they gain 30 pounds of muscle in the 10 years of lifting. They wouldn't have to struggle so much with the idea of being obese because they have enough muscle. All right? I want to say one more thing. There was a guy who did a 10,000 calorie challenge. He was a fitness guy, and the next day he thought, I'm going to try to burn off 10,000 calories, like just to see if it's possible. So he was wearing a weighted vest, hiking up mountain, lifting weights for 13 hours. He burned 7,000 calories. Didn't even get to 10,000. So you can kind of conclude, if given to the extreme, you would not inevitably be able to burn off what you're taking in. And the biggest thing is when you become aware, like, okay, that little cupcake is 300 calories. That's like an hour and a half of cardio on a Stairmaster. Like, it becomes real when you actually start counting the calories, right? You count the cost. All right, so how many calories? How do you calculate your calories? You would start off with a Harris-Benedict formula or a Mueller equation, which I actually like the Mueller equation because it accounts for muscle mass. It's the most accurate. Kind of hard to find on the internet, but Store it away if you find it. Metabolic assessment. You can do metabolic assessment. We do them here. Basically, it's based off your carbon dioxide output, and it can measure your metabolism, and it's pretty accurate. But whatever you do, track your calories for like a week, and then come back and then assess, because it could be different. Because you could be different you than 6 months ago, based off your diet history, based off of what you've been doing, your activity level. So when you find your BMR, you multiply it by 1.55, and that will generate, and then you need to generate your desired deficit or surplus by adding or subtracting calories. So if you want to subtract calories, I recommend starting off around 500. Now some people may say, well, shouldn't you like ease into it? Shouldn't you do like 200, then 300, then 400? You could do that, but it's just going to take you slower. You might as well just hop in there, especially if you're at a higher body fat percentage. You can actually sustain a bigger blow to the deficit, and that's obviously going to vary on body weight. If someone is 115 pounds, then they don't need a 500 calorie deficit. If someone is 300 pounds, they need way more than a 500 calorie deficit. So for building muscle, I generally recommend for just about anybody 250 calories above maintenance, which is not big. I call it lean bulking. It's not a dirty bulk. It's because you'll have minimal fat gain. You'll still gain some fat, but it'll be more quality muscle tissue when you do it that way. And I've just done that for like 10 years. Never lose more than 1% of your body weight per week. That is the golden rule of fat loss. All right. So if you do that, if you say, well, I ate really clean, Coach Evan, and I ate all my protein, Coach Evan, but I lost 3.4 pounds of weight this week, I will look at you and say, we need to change your macros. We need to change your calories because it's too big of a deficit. And you would rather change the calorie intake than to say, well, just train harder next time or do more workouts. Instead of 5 workouts, do 6, because it's an easier way to do it. 200 pounds, losing more than 2 pounds per week, right? So for me, if I was doing a show prep, I weigh about 195. I would not want to lose more than 1.9 pounds per week. If I do, I have failed as a bodybuilder, pretty much, because you only have a certain amount of time to get it done. This will result in significant muscle loss, and it's easier to do than you think. People do it all the time. And if they would just take the slow road, they wouldn't have to keep redoing what they undid. You know what I'm saying? Do it the right way instead of doing it faster. The slow way is always the shortcut. All right, so 2.4 to 2.6 grams of protein per kilogram of lean body mass. That's how I calculate protein for everybody, whether they're 15 years old or 90 years old. Now, the 2.4 is like if you're in your 20s. 2.5 is like as if you're in your 40s. 2.6 is if you're in your 60s. That's kind of the range there. But if you find out, let's say you have a client, 150 pounds, 20% body fat, that's a 30 pounds of fat mass. You take their weight minus their fat mass, and it gives you their lean body mass, 120 pounds of lean body mass. You convert that to kilograms, which gives you 54 kilograms. Then you multiply our factor of 2.4 times the lean body mass, which gives you 129 grams daily protein. And that will never change unless they build significant amount of muscle or lose a significant amount of muscle. But that shouldn't change much. It may creep up a little bit over time. That would be ideal. But even in 5 years, you may not gain more than about 10 pounds of muscle. So it's not going to change much. Okay. One study has shown the registered dietitians on average were off up to about 300 calories when eating intuitively. So intuitively, everybody thinks they can do it intuitively, whether they make that statement or not. Everybody in this gym, they're like, I don't need to track calories. I'm good. I eat what I want. However, they're not going to be making progress year to year. I've improved every year that I've done this. I've been tracking for 14 years. I've got more muscle mass than I did last year. I'm leaner in my off season. I'm stronger than I've ever been. Just that's the way it should be. All right, that's a 2,100 calorie difference a week. So if you say, I'm just going to eat intuitively, you could be off. And these are experts, registered dietitians. So nobody is immune to human error. Calorie tracking apps like MyFitnessPal are great. There's a lot of apps out there. I just like that one because it's been around the longest. It increases adherence and intrinsic motivation. Also provides more freedom to eat what you want, more of a flexible dieting approach. The average American unknowingly consumes, we talked about this, 3,500 calories. When in a deficit, the trick is to not lose muscle by losing weight slowly. When in a surplus, the trick is to gain weight slowly so you do not add muscle, mostly muscle. I'm sorry. So you don't add mostly fat and not just muscle. That's a better way to say that. This is the fat loss pyramid from Dr. Eric Helms. Sustainability adherence would be the most important thing at the bottom, because what good is a caloric deficit if you can't sustain and adhere to what you're doing to achieve the goal? I remember one time I bought a shipment from bodybuilding.com. This is a long time ago, and it said finish something. It was like that was on the box. It just said finish something. And it's so true. It's like if people would just finish their goal, they could go on to the next goal. But so many people are stuck at like the alphabet, A, B, C, B, like let's move on. All right, exercise. You can't do it without exercise. There's not a single doctor that's going to tell you diet alone. No, they're going to say diet and exercise, because that's, you got to sustain that muscle mass. Whoops. Self-monitoring. What is self-monitoring? It's stepping on the scale once a week. It's tracking your calories. It's measuring your waistline. It's taking photos of your selfies in the mirror. It's any form of tracking, and that's been shown to increase intrinsic motivation more than anything. That's why I have an Instagram, because I like to post my lifts. It shows me what I've done before. I can do it again. I've got confidence to do it because I've done it. Protein and fiber intake. Why is that more important than carbs and fat? Because protein and fiber is what satiates you, is what keeps you on track. If someone thinks that they're going to have a sugar problem, it's because they're not eating enough protein. If you would eat protein, it would stabilize your blood sugar, but it's every 2 to 3 hours is kind of ideal. When I coach people, I tell them eat about 5 to 6 meals a day, if you can. Not like a home cooked meal, but like put something on your stomach with protein about 5 times a day. Carbs and fat macros, this almost doesn't really matter. A lot of people, they throw around the word macros. I don't even really tell people to track their macros. I tell people to track their protein and their calories, because you could be off. You could be off by 20 grams of fat, but go under on carbs. But if your calories are the same, it won't matter. Has no difference on body composition. Supplements, number 1 at the top. So this is the least important thing. To be honest, even though we're selling supplements here, you cannot say that there's one pill that will do it for you. It's adhering to a caloric deficit. That's what you're getting in the main picture. The only real fat loss supplements I can recommend, number 1, it would not be caffeine. I would not use that. That would be more of a strength supplement. I'd say potentially creatine, so you don't lose muscle mass if you're doing it properly. I would also say ashwagandha. I'm a big fan of. It's an adaptogen herb, helps with sustains cortisol levels. There's not much else. I don't believe in CLA. I don't think it really works. I don't think it does anything. The claims they make for that product are just not right. Even like branched chain amino acids, I'm not a huge, I don't push it. I would say glutamine powder is good though. Glutamine is a branched chain amino acid and it helps with recovery. We'll talk more about that later. Okay, sugar. We're going to talk about sugar. In one longitudinal study, 2 groups of about 100 people each ate in a calorie deficit for 20 weeks. Protein and calories were equated. However, one group had 100 grams of sugar a day. The other had 10 grams of sugar a day. Which group do you think lost more weight? What do you think? That's what you would think, but they actually lost the same amount of weight. And this study can be replicated and duplicated over and over. Why? Because sugar does not cause fat gain or inhibit fat loss independent of calories. Is there any benefit to tracking sugar? That would be the mindset question. Does Coach Evan want you tracking sugar? Well, keep your sugar low because you know it's a lot harder to diet when you don't when you eat too much sugar. It could potentially be more difficult, but really when you're talking about a lot of times when people try to talk trash about sugar or carbs, what they're really talking about is things that contain both high fat and high carb. For example, ice cream. The problem with ice cream is not just sugar. It's also the fact that it's liquid calories and the fat. There's a lot of fat. I mean, there's tons of fat in ice cream. People overlook that, you know? Same thing with pizza. Pizza is bad because of carbs. No, what about the fat? So in nature, you do not have in any scenario a whole food that has both high carb and high fat. Even avocados are very low carb, which are high fat. Even bananas, which are very high sugar, are very low fat. But you can have one or the other, but not both. That's the biggest takeaway, I think, because we talked about the different diet models, the high carb, low carb thing. So I don't even see a benefit in really tracking just carbs. So sugar, you don't really need to track sugar. You don't really need to. If you're eating quality meals and you're hitting your protein, you won't even crave sugar. Just a fact. Won't be an issue. So why is there so much misinformation about all this and sugar? And because the problem with interpreting data, okay, you've got people taking something out of context. You got case reports, opinion papers, letters, animal trials, in vitro study. Now the animal trials, that's like basically everything negative you've ever heard about artificial sweeteners comes from rats. Then you've got randomized human control trials. Never in the history of mankind has there ever been a negative report indicating that non-nutritive sweeteners have any negative effect on human beings from human-controlled randomized trials. I hope that makes sense. Because there is a hierarchy here. Meta-analysis is the gold standard in science. Meta-analysis is a study of studies. Okay? So for us to make a connection or a claim, well, you know, red meat causes cancer because don't you know, gluten makes you fat, don't you know? Well, why? Because some guy read an article and posted it from some opinion paper, or maybe it was some marker was too high in an animal, but it was never found in humans, right? So that's why there's such a disparity of opinion on the internet with nutrition, you know? So you really got to make sure you know who you're listening to, you know the source, and you almost only want to listen really to randomized human control trials or meta-analysis. Those are your two basic ones I would just stick with. If they're not supported by either of those, you could probably toss it out. So there's just a few references in case you wanted to see that. There's some more. All right. How to hit your protein. You need about 25 to 30 grams of protein per meal, about 4 to 5 times a day, the average person. If you're like me and you have a lot of muscle and you're around 200 pounds, you probably need about 6 meals a day. That's the only difference. It pretty much stays the same for everybody. Whether you're diabetic, whether you're keto, is a person that wants to eat true keto, I'm not going to coach them because they don't know what they're talking about. Like, that's not health. That's not healthy. That they're going to lose muscle mass because a true keto is like 10% protein intake. It's too little. They're not eating any protein. It's all fat. I mean, just sticks of butter over and over. So that looks like a high protein breakfast, high protein lunch, high protein snack, high protein dinner. This is if you're in a deficit. This is maybe like 3 or 4 months out of the year, ideally, if you just want to trim up for summer or spring break. But you don't need to always reduce your calories to that. But if you shoot for that, you can't go wrong. Because if you hit your protein early in the day, you can just snack on whatever you want later. And that's the beauty of flexible dieting. Some common myths about creatine. We're going to talk creatine. Oh man, I'm going fast. Okay. Oh no, never mind. It's 11:30. It's bad for your kidneys. Is it? So why do people always say creatine is bad for your kidneys? Because there's this thing called creatinine levels they get super elevated because you're dehydrated, and they think, oh, he's having renal failure, we better get him off of creatine. But anybody knows that that is actually a false positive. Or, it's not something to actually be concerned about, right? So anyway, it causes hair loss. No, it doesn't. So a lot of people that claim it causes hair loss are also like pro bodybuilders that go bald because of steroids, because their DHT levels are off. It has nothing to do with the creatine. I've been taking creatine for probably 15 years. It dehydrates you. That's somewhat true, but it depends what you mean by dehydrate. So it's actually hydrating your muscles, but it's pulling water away from other areas. Yeah, you might have to drink a little bit more water, but it's going to improve performance. So I don't know if you could make the claim that it just dehydrates you, disrupts your hormones like steroids. Nobody really says that, but I'm just throwing that in there because it doesn't. It is a zoochemical. It has no effect on your hormones whatsoever. Neutral effect. You shouldn't take it long term. That's another thing. People think you need to cycle it like steroids. You don't need to cycle creatine. There's never a reason to get off unless you just want to dry out and actually dehydrate. It's funny. When bodybuilders want to dehydrate, they actually get off of creatine. Every one of them. Proven to make you significantly stronger. Okay. It does help you build muscle. There was a guy, I remember I was like 20 years old. I watched a video on YouTube. This guy was like, I'm gonna take creatine and do bicep curls every day for 30 days. And I'm gonna measure my bicep afterwards to see. And he gained like an inch on his arm. Now some of that could be inflammation and stuff, but I thought that's interesting. Like really put it to the test, like does it actually help you build muscle? And this guy has been lifting for a while. Been lifting for 8 years or whatever. So it is all natural. It's found in your body. It's found in every source of meat. Okay, like red meat. So if you've ever had a steak or you've had a burger, you've had creatine before. It's good for all ages. I've pretty much told people to get on it that were teenagers to senior citizens. Okay, so male, female, it doesn't matter. Has been shown to diminish the effects of cognitive decline and aging. This is a more recent thing. I can't say that it's going to completely stop Alzheimer's, but it's been shown in certain studies to be effective. I think why is, if you think about it, kind of hydrates your brain a little bit more. And I know that your brain runs off of triglycerides, omega fatty acids. So like salmon is actually one of the best sources for that. But this is doing something different because there's no fat calories in this. There's no triglycerides. It gives you more energy. Now people think, well, I don't need energy. I got my caffeine. This is a different type of energy. Caffeine doesn't actually give you energy. It blocks your sleep receptors, makes you more awake. This actually gives you energy from the mitochondrial DNA. And what I want to say about that is it's not just in the workout, it's throughout the day. You'll have more energy, because it's not something you get on, get off. You take it continually. It's like water. Anyway. Has zero effects on hormones or energy balance, so you won't gain any body fat from it. You may gain a little bit of water weight initially from the loading phase of the creatine. Sometimes they'll say you need to load up on, 5 scoops of creatine for the first 5 days to load up on creatine. It's a simple way of making you use up the product faster. So it's kind of misleading. We don't do that at Lifetime. We don't put that on our product, but that was a practice a long time ago for a lot of companies that did that. It's very cheap. I was going to say something about energy, but I was going to say you're up to 19% stronger on any lift when you're fully hydrated. Now, creatine monohydrate has 100% saturation rate. That is better than any other creatine source or creatine form. There's crealkaline, there's all different types. And their claim is, well, our creatine doesn't really give you as much water retention. So I'm just like, well, what you're telling me is that it's not effective because you want water retention when you're taking creatine. That's the whole point. You don't want too much of it, They usually recommend 3 to 5 grams. I take 3 grams. I don't even take 5 grams. And I'm almost 200 pounds. So, yep. Creatine with auto ship, it's about 24 bucks. All right. This is some smoothies. You got some protein powder, some mango, some nut milk like almond milk, and then some life greens and a cup of ice. All right. So that's going to be very low fat and a little bit more high sugar. And it's vegan as well. Then you got the Dreamsicle one. I don't do a ton of smoothies at home unless I'm trying to gain weight because it's easier to consume liquid calories than it is food. Most bodybuilders, you see them eating 10 ounces of chicken with white rice. It's like, why don't they just do a smoothie? Because it takes 2 hours to eat it. That's why. Mini frittatas to go. All right. Cooking spray. Eggland's best. Oh, great. Shredded cheddar. Still. Got some herbs in there. The thing about when you actually become a good cook as far as eating healthier, you quickly find ways to add flavor without adding fats. I have a saying, fats taste good, carbs make you feel good, and protein makes you look good. So if you can eliminate fats but still keep the flavor by adding herbs or salt or whatever, it will go a long way. Here's some good sources of protein. I just pulled this up. Obviously, Greek yogurt, egg whites, deli turkey. When I say egg whites, I'm referring to the actual carton. If I tell somebody to start eating egg whites, I'm not talking about cracking open the egg and dividing it out because that's raw. These are pasteurized, and there's like one carton is 100 grams of protein. Yeah, you can get your protein really easy that way, But who wants to live that way? Probably nobody. But in a pinch, it could help. Yeah, in a pinch, it can definitely help. If you can't hit your protein, whey protein isolate. Now, why is whey protein everywhere? It's like the best supplement for muscle building. Why? You know why? Well, it is dairy. It's not vegan, so dairy does come with lactose, which a lot of people are intolerant to, maybe about 30% of the population. But what I would say is there's been so many studies done on dairy. It's a net positive consuming dairy, I believe. It's my personal opinion. But one of the reasons why whey is so good, there's the two highest sources of leucine on the planet are whey and egg whites. Leucine is the amino acid that actually triggers muscle protein synthesis. If you had a vegan or plant-based protein, it would take twice the amount of protein to equal the leucine content of whey protein. So you have to do double scoop. And we already know that the vegan powder is kind of chalky. So the only time in which you would want to take vegan protein, I really can't think of a time, because it's kind of like saying, I want to get hydrated from sand. It's like that's not really the good place to go to for that. If you are lactose intolerant, you could still go with isolate because isolate is only 1% lactose. Whey concentrate is 5% lactose. And even before I would go to vegan protein, I would go to egg white protein. They actually do make it. It does exist. And that doesn't have any lactose in it. Tastes a little bit different though. Helps with muscle recovery and strengthens the immune system. L-glutamine. This is probably my number one most pushed supplement as a coach. People are always sore because we lift heavy weights, we work out. But it can help improve your gut and your immune system. And people don't really realize that because when you train your body hard, you're breaking it down, and it's wintertime, you're more likely to get sick. So this is the best thing you can take for recovery, for sure. And it's just an amino acid. Again, no calories. I usually take up to 3 scoops a day or more, sometimes 6 scoops if I do it twice a day, because it's just really good for you. All right, trainer code. This is kind of the end here. 10% off of supplements with this trainer code if you already have it. Do you already have that?
Yeah.
Okay. Or if you buy in the cafe, they have it like a cheat sheet back, behind the counter. Text my cell, set up an appointment today for nutrition coaching. All right. And I want to go back to this. Okay. So a lot of times people say, well, sugar makes you fat or, causing obesity, blah, blah, blah. So like in the year 2000, obesity was climbing, sugar intake. Let's see if I can find, nope, nope, nope. So right about here, right about the year 1999, the sugar intake actually started to go down, and it did go down. I don't know if there's a chart for that. Oh, here it is. Sugar intake went down, but obesity kept climbing. So what we thought for a while was sugar and obesity are correlated. Sugar makes you fat. Sugar causes diabetes. Stay away from sugar. Sugar's going to kill us all. It's just as addicting as cocaine. No. None of that really turned out to be true, because what happened in this time frame, health food stores started coming out, like Whole Foods, Sprouts. So they started eliminating a lot of sugar. However, obesity kept climbing. So what is the cause of obesity? It's really just too much food. It's if you took the amount of food in the world, like in just Texas, you could feed the whole world. Like if you distributed it properly. Yeah, like everything's bigger in Texas, right? So it's amazing because there's so many more food options, so many more fast food places. In the 1950s, there were none until McDonald's showed up, and then fast food has a large part to play in obesity, but it's accumulation of everything. It's just calories in general.